Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another Creator Spotlight. I think this is going to be our first Creator Spotlight for 2023. We did a bunch last year, and we have a bunch coming up this month. So if you're not already followed to us on Unity on Twitch, that's right. We're no longer Unity Tech on Twitch. We are now Unity on Twitch, finally, official. Make sure to follow us, and we'll be streaming. We have a bunch of very interesting Creator Spotlights coming up, and we have one for you right now. Today we'll be speaking to Whales and Games with their game Townseek. I'm extremely excited to look at this game. It has a beautiful 2D art style. It's all about exploring a whimsical and cute, fantastical map and journaling your way through trading, exploring, mining, fishing. You know, every good game needs a fishing mechanic, and this game has one, so we're gonna be looking at that. Before I introduce the team, let's take a close look at the trailer. So let's cut to the trailer. Hello, everyone. So we're here back with 2 out of 3 of the Whales and Games team. We're here with George and Mosky. I'll allow you to introduce yourself. So George, please go first.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm George. I'm the co-founder and lead developer of Whales and Games. I handle pretty much everything regarding Unity in our project. I pretty much take any assets that Mosky is going to present himself next, makes, and add them into game. I set up like all of the information that is designed by us both and add them in game. And yeah, I'm based in Portugal. It's very sunny here right now. And nice. Yeah, it's a great time. And I'm very pleased to be here with you all for this Creator Spotlight.
Oh, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for joining. And Mosky.
Hello, I'm Jose Sanchez, most commonly known as Mosky because of my handles of how I am here. I'm the lead artist and the co-designer of Townseek. I work here at Whales and Games along with George. I live in Mexico, so we have this multicultural team going on. And so far, well, we've been developing Townseek for a while, but we've known each other for many years and are going to celebrate our 5th anniversary of Whales and Games this year. So that's also great. So it's good to be here as well, showcasing along with you Unity, which we've been using for a long time now. Great times.
Yeah, congrats on the anniversary. And by the way, I introduced you as Mosky on your request. So, I guess people can call you Jose, Mosky. There's a third person on the team, right? Who's not here with us today. Maybe you want to talk about them a little bit?
John Elliott is our audio composer. He pretty much sets up everything in regards to F mods, audio events. Like he pretty much prepares... he composes all of the soundtrack, he does all of the sound design, and then I take care of the implementation in the engine sides.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Good shout out to John. Great. So for people who aren't aware and aren't informed about Whales and Games, could you give us a little bit of a history about your studio and how things got started? How you met? One of you is in Portugal, the other one's in Mexico. How did this happen?
So it's quite a funny history because it pretty much hails back to the early days of the internet. Me and Mosky mostly met by pure chance while we were working on a fun project together. And then as we talked over the years, we had this mutual interest of developing games. We started very early with, another program with RPG Maker. And then later on, I started like actually getting interested in studying game development formally, and as I started having professional courses and academic courses, I pretty much got involved into the game dev world professionally, and I ended up dragging Muskie because I needed an artist.
Okay.
And yeah, we started with doing multiple game jam games. We started participating in Ludum Dare, Global Game Jam, Game Maker Toolkit Jam. Like we started participating on all of those, and yeah, we switched it over to Unity, and I've been working on 2D games ever since.
Okay, so did you know Mosky before you got into your career of making games? Was it while you were studying?
We were it was when I was studying, but even before I actually started like getting into game development formally. Like we met 10 years now, so that's very incredible. Early days of the internet compared to what it
been
is
a
now.
Bit of both. Like video games have been a thing of our lives since we have memory. So he had his own life with video games. I had already made some very small projects that never got finished, but on RPG Maker or the likes. So when we talked I met George online. We bonded through some games that we liked, like Ace Attorney, Team Fortress, and with years we decided to finally make a games. Our first official game was made on RPG Maker. It was the farming one. It was a mix of a farming game and a needle clicker, so it was an incremental game. It was very fast-paced and different to the standard RPG Maker experience. And ever since we started formally participating on more game jams, we continued to make games that were not that had some specific weird quirk that was more unique to what we got. And that's what part of our philosophy now.
And how did you get started with art, Mosky? Like, the art you're making is extremely beautiful for the game, and people already saw that from the trailer. But how did you get started? Was it in games? Was it just more traditional art?
No, when in the early days of the internet, where there were people wanted to frequent more forums before Facebook and social media, I just started liking some people that were making sprite comics. And I started doing digital sprites, started making comics when I was about 13 years old, when I got my first digital tablet. And ever since, I've never had any sort of formal learnings of art, but I've been always checking on tutorials, thanks to YouTube, thanks to other programs and other artists. I've been developing my style, looking at inspirations like the people that work on Newgrounds and now the Behemoth and Paladin. So I continue to develop a cartoonish style, more refined, hopefully, with each iteration, without restraining myself. So despite having studied finances or marketing, I've mostly been enjoying doing more of 2D artwork.
Okay, great. And we're gonna get a chance to see that iteration right now, because we have some of your old projects on hand, and maybe you can talk us through them. We have one of your Global Game Jam projects. I believe this was a Global Game Jam project. I could be mistaken, but it's called...
No, yeah, it was made for Game Maker's Toolkit Jam.
That's right.
Game Jam for Game Maker's Toolkit. I think 2 years ago. It's hard to you lose time when you you lose track of time when you are developing like a full-fledged game. But yeah, it was one of the projects we did for GMTK Game Jam, and yeah, this one is one of our most recent ones. It was only 48 hours, and we worked with another audio composer who's helped us called Robin. I don't think he's on chat today, but yeah. Pretty much 48 hours. Like, we just wanted to make this interesting game where you photograph shooting stars, you connect them, and you essentially get like a score as you go along, and then at the end you can even export the wallpaper you made by placing those constellations around.
Oh, that's
good. Which was the theme of the jam?
Good question. I don't remember from the top of my head.
I think it was Connections or something like that, no?
The theme was Connections? Like I see.
I think so, yes.
And this game is called Star Snap, as you can see, written in the bottom right. But so I love that concept. So you're basically freezing the shooting stars in place and then forming constellations from them? Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Beautiful. And how do you collect points? Like, is there a goal? Is it about collecting the most points or something?
It's mostly something casual. Again, while we do game jam stuff, we mostly just experiment with what we've got.
Yeah.
And this one, like, there's a score system, but it's more like because of game design necessity in a way.
Yeah.
You get scores by the number of stars you get in a single picture. You get by like any background elements that you are able to capture in camera. You might even see the Townseek ship somewhere in that frame, because there it is. It was actually after we had already done the first iteration of of Townseek.
I see.
Which we'll
Interesting.
talk
Little
more
Easter
in a bit.
eggs already. Okay. Love that. Chat says how it started versus how it's going meme right before your eyes. So yes. So then for the next, we also have another one that you've worked on called Art Fight Duel. Oh, this one's got a lot going on. So let's jump to that one. This is just wild. I love this. Can you tell me about? I mean, I've seen the video. I don't know anything about it, so I'm dying to hear more about this game.
Maki, you can probably
This has a
explain
bit
this one.
more of this has a bit more of history with my background because there's this website called Art Fight, which every year at July, I believe, they hold for 1 month an event where artists draw each other's people's original characters.
Yeah.
So with the help
Heard
of
of
yours, we decided to put a bit of our DNA. He has been helping me a lot with these events every year. And on there was a year in particular where we decided that instead of just making artwork of some people, let's try to make an actual game with characters from others. So we put them, we tagged them. We originally made the first Art Fight Duel, and the year previous to this one, it was 2021 years.
2021, yes.
So we made this one. Yes, we made an expansion to that game, which is this iteration of Art Fight Duel with themes of cyberpunk and steampunk.
Okay.
And it was pretty much the project of the month, where
So
it's
yes.
a card battler, an auto battler card game.
Yeah. Yeah, this
So
is
yeah,
so impressive. I mean, you did this in a month, you say?
2 months because
months, okay.
it had like we made the first version in 2020 and then we made the second expansion in 2021. This last year we were already busy with Townseek, so we weren't able to add to it. But we think like the people like Mosky mentioned, because it's an event where you draw other people characters, each of these characters are either someone else's, some other artist's characters, used with permission of course, or their own. And yeah, like the people who saw their character added into game just pretty much had like, they flipped over it.
Yeah, they must have loved it.
Because, they just have like these very unique sprite of their characters. They see them interacting in the game. They have like their own description.
Yeah.
So they really enjoyed it. So for the purpose of these projects, we did what we had to do.
But everything looks very cohesive. So were their characters taken and then redrawn in Mosky's style? That's the idea, right? Okay, cool.
And the website has fantastic styles, but we didn't need to try to make them feel like they were part of the same world. So
of course,
I use the event to make us a lot of practice with different styles, but for this one in particular, it's more of a challenge of putting all of these while some realistic, some pastels, some the like, and just trying to adapt them to this one. Also, if you pay attention, you may see some of the well-singing characters, including one of our game Townseek over there.
Okay. And I mean, I have to say, like, for a 2-month game, this game looks complete. It's very impressive that you did this in 2 months.
I mean, we did have 1 year of reflection in between those two iterations, and it's very interesting to see how the game changed from the first iteration, which people said, hey, this is too visually noisy, hey, there's like some mechanics here that don't make much sense. And now, like on the second iteration, we feel like it's more clear what you're supposed to actually be doing. Like we lean more into the card battler than necessarily like what we had in the first version, which had like a timer and you actually run out of time. So the second version is way more streamlined, way more clean in terms of visuals, and it's just the reaction was very positive. And we still have people on our, for example, our community Discord who play it like very frequently because their character is on it. So,
oh no way, still? Okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I swear there's one person that has played like 200 hours of this. That's insane.
That's a huge compliment, first of all. But also, I love that you say it's like, this is the first time I ever hear this. 2 months of work and 1 year of reflection. Like when people ask you how long you've been working on the game, that's very interesting. So yeah, and then going from this, there was another global game jam. I think it was a global game jam this time. And what was the theme? We're going to be looking at the first early version of Townseek, correct? There it is.
Yes. There it is. Townseek has had a bit of an interesting development story because this was, we just came out or in between, depends on how you think about it, a global pandemic. And so 2020 was a bit of a hard year on everyone, but specifically as we were working on we were trying to get a commercial project going. It was a bit of a visual novel management game, and it kind of wasn't heading anywhere. Like we weren't able to, iterate on it fast enough. We weren't satisfied with the art direction, it just wasn't clicking as much as we had expected. Like, so while the design was satisfying, like the actual implementation was not matching what we expected. So, to just kind of get like a palette cleanser, we were like, hey, let's do Global Game Jam because this year it's online. So we have the opportunity to actually do it together as a team this time. And over many times, like ever since the farming one, we kind of had this idea of wanting to make like a game that brought multiple types of characters and species together and kind of just make like this exploration interactive game, but we never quite landed the design. And one of the things me and Mosky really enjoy doing is traveling. We love going to game conferences, we love visiting other places in our countries and other countries outside our own. And yeah, we just felt the need and motivation to make a game that captured that feeling of traveling and exploration.
Actually, it goes even further than that, because despite having known each other for so many years, I have only gone to Portugal once to meet George, and then we had another meeting that we had planned to go. It was, I think, GDC from 2020.
Okay.
Yes.
So we booked our reservations of the Airbnb.
Yeah.
George had a scholarship, or what was that you got?
Yes, I had a Global Game Jam scholarship, which later
yes.
on got
So,
reused in 2022, but yes.
Yeah. Everything was planned to go, and then all of the flights were cancelled because the world went into hiatus because of the whole pandemic.
Yes.
So all of our fees were waste. That opportunity to meet my friend for the second time in our lives went down the drain. And up to a point, you can say that the idea of going into Townseek further came out as both frustration from that thing that we could no longer travel, and the idealization that maybe in a great world people will be able to travel wherever they wanted with a lot less hurdles.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful story. Oh my god. So this game about traveling came out of the inability to travel in person. That's so great.
And it's interesting because again, because of our feelings of the previous project and the feelings caused by the pandemic, we've also did Townseek as a Global Game Jam project, not expecting, honestly, it to be a big deal. We kind of were just, we've done multiple Game Jam before, as we saw, so we were expecting it to be pretty much a one and done deal.
Mm-hmm.
And, we added one more mechanic, which was curiously fishing. After the first jam prototype, we put it on each itch.io, the site where you're able to host jam projects and whatnot, and the reaction immediately there was amazing. So we got featured, front page featured. People were joining our Discord, telling us how much they liked the concept of the game, how much they enjoyed collecting the different items that were available, the characters that we had on the towns. And suddenly, since we were stuck on the previous project, we were like, hey, we have something that we're enjoying working here. We have something that people are reacting positively to. Let's see what we can do with this. So we started concepting another update to that Game Jam version, while also preparing to go ahead into working on a full version.
Okay, I see. And so then we have that other version, I think you're talking about, right? Which was the update. So let's play a clip of that and see how that looks in comparison to the first one, which is the I think it's this one, right? Yeah.
So this one added a few more mechanics. It added like one more town. It's essentially just polished up the experience.
Right.
And at the same time, because we were already working on, we already had the decision to do the full version, and we were working on the game design documents and all of the assets we needed to go onwards to, the full game. When we launched this version, we already launched it with the Steam page for what will become the full version, which is what we're going to get into today.
Okay. And so I think we have it on hand. Do you already have your editor open and ready for us?
Yes, I actually have the editor open. Let me just take a quick sip.
Great, yeah, take your time. So we're going to jump right into the editor and look at what the game looks like today in comparison to what it looked like from the Global Game Jam. And actually, I do have a question.
Colors.
It has colors now, exactly.
Yes.
When you did the original one, you did that in just a week, right? Like all of that we just saw was done in about the week of the Game Jam that was allowed.
So the Global Game Jam one was 48 hours.
48, never mind. Okay. Yeah.
And then we iterated it a bit more over the next weeks. It's a bit hard to know exactly how much time we iterated on it because we were still figuring out what the next steps were. But yes.
And now, how much time have you had to work on this version we're looking at right now?
Okay, so we released the Steam page for Townseek in September 2021.
Okay.
So pretty much continuous ever since, I'd say. So it's been September 2021 to February 2023. So a year
Perfect.
and a few months. Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's look at it. So let's jump right in and hit
All
play
right,
or
so I
something.
can possibly
we can
actually play
float
it,
around.
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me quickly open the game tab, let it go, and see how it goes. So yeah, Musky, do you want to quickly mention like the change in art style?
Sure thing. So, because we had to develop the original Townseek in 2 days, we needed to settle with how to make as much artwork as possible with as little time. So it's impressive that we made like 5, 6, or 7 towns in just a span of 2 days because it required adding characters, adding items. So with the limited colors and the simplistic style, which I'm going to get into a bit later, we managed to make a game that worked well, but it looked. We originally intended it to look like an old map, so everything is brown as like old-timey maps. And we decided to turn into this new version of the game. As we decided to make it bigger, to add more places, to make it more interesting, we started thinking that the palette was not going to cut it because everything is going to look the same no matter how much we add. So we decided to go with more pastel colors to make the game look a bit more like a fantasy book, and while retaining a lot of its elements. Yes.
Ironically, we did end up using that early palette for the starting cutscene, which is meant to be on the past. They're unrelated. They're unrelated. Like the game story and the game jam version are unrelated.
Okay.
But we actually ended up using that brownish sepia style for the cutscenes of this game. So. Quickly recapping the pitch of the game, you already know that it's a trading exploration game, but your main quest is about recollecting this journal of this character called Sir Reginald Sharkingston.
Mm-hmm.
So it's heavily implied in the game that you're a shark dweller, so you're a literal shark, and you're essentially understanding the story, recollecting the journal pages and the story of this character called Sir Reginald Sharkingston here on the left. Who invented the first airships that allow you to travel the world. He invented shark legs because we couldn't decide if we wanted like actual sharks or sharks that could stand in both legs, so we ended up doing both. And then we like adapted that as the game story and the main motivation, and which we basically turned this entire world that we had created for the game jam version into Explorer, which is the world of this full version.
That's such a good story. So the sharks freed themselves from the sea, took to the skies in their shark-shaped airships, and that's great.
Yes, you wanna talk a bit more about that, Musky?
The thing is that it's very funny how we ended up with this concept, because in the very early ideas of the game jam for Townseek, I originally just doodled a helicopter, and then I said the helicopter is not going to cut it. Let's just make it a balloon.
Yeah.
And at some point, the balloon, I just made it into a shark for no discernible reason.
And it just worked. Okay.
And it just worked. So we expanded with the idea, okay, maybe the character is a shark. Maybe there's a shark character as well.
So the shark balloon came before the shark character. I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then the whole story followed from there.
Yes. The first character we designed was the cat, which George is going to show in a moment, I hope.
There you go.
But the last character we made for the jam was the actual shark. So we did not have a plan for that, but we have ever since incorporated it, and it's been one of my favorite characters to design.
Amazing, and you got to bring in all the other characters as well, since you meet them anyway. Yes. It's not just all sharks in the filling up the world. It's all kinds of characters.
So yeah, as the namesake of the game is, it's called Townseek. So you're exploring, you're seeking towns. That's the entire punchline. And as you explore the world. So before I introduce trading more in depth, you go around the world. You find multiple landmarks. These landmarks introduce you a bit of the world. They have like small blurbs of interesting text. Some of them are like reference to old games. Some of them are things that are interesting in the worlds.
Yeah.
So, for example, a sandcastle made by crabs, a park with dogs, a cave that's used as a bodybuilding gym. There's all sorts of like whimsical.
Isn't that every gym basically a cave?
Pretty much.
Basically, there's not the same.
Yes, and so you have like all of these interesting points into worlds, and then like the more interesting aspect is the actual towns. So most of the depth of the game actually comes from the towns themselves. You have like each town has their own town host. Here we have Whiskey, one of the other very popular characters of the game because people love cats. And one of the main thing you do at towns is, trade stuff with them. So the idea is that you go by town to town trading items between them, and you're essentially trying to make a profit. So for example, here I can say that goggles are a profit because they're above the price.
Okay.
This portable video game also sells above average. This treasure chest also sells above average. And our goal was essentially to make a trading game that was interesting, a bit collected on in a way, because you can collect all of these items and show them in a collection. I'll show you in a bit.
Oh, nice.
And also, just a chill game that you can look forward. Again, this was originally concepted during the pandemic. We were a bit stressed out for, all of us because of various reasons that were happening in the world at the time.
Yep.
So we kind of just wanted to create this wholesome, chill experience. And you've been iterating on this depth as we've gone along. So here I can purchase more items from the shop. I can also accept quests from the town. Each town has multiple quests I can take. Most of them are like fetch quests that you can do. As you unlock more and more of the world, you unlock more fetch quests that you can do as you explore around. And some of them are about exploring, just traveling around. Like here's another landmark, here's another town.
And I guess some items are more valuable in some towns than in others, right?
Exactly. So
Some back-end supply-demand system.
Yes, each item has a category. And again, to try to keep to approach accessible while still trying to add some depth.
Right.
Each item has their own category, and different towns will roll fluctuations. Again, I'll show you that backend in a bit.
Yeah.
Each town will roll that fluctuation, and that fluctuation determines the price of an item in a given town when you visit it. Different towns will have different fluctuations. Some items are more likely to be, some categories are more likely to be as the profits in certain towns than others. There's still the possibility that it might be below average, but some towns will definitely benefit certain items more. So here's another character. Here's the slime people with Blubby.
Of course. What else would the slime person be called?
And the other part of the game, what's interesting, you're doing these main quests where you're collecting the Journal of Sir Reginald Sharkington. But as you start obtaining profit and as you start advancing through the story, you're also, getting upgrades that you unlock more areas of the world. So you're going to see that there's some areas here of the world that are covered. So you unlock those as you purchase items in towns and also progress into main quests.
Okay. We have some great questions coming in from the chat. Tunmix asks, which platforms do you target with this game? Looks very deterministic, stylized, cool, looking good. Lots of compliments there.
So right now we're targeting primarily PC. We're working on making it work on PC, Linux, and Steam Deck itself. We're still checking on macOS. We're checking if our lovely QA team can help us with that, but we still haven't announced it officially. Okay. And we've recently announced, thanks to our publish at Super Rare Games and Super Rare Originals, that we're also bringing them to consoles.
Wow.
We can't announce which consoles are yet, but we're looking into that. So we're also trying to make it work on consoles. So we're trying to support this wide range of different items, of different platforms.
Perfect. That's wonderful. So more people will get to experience the game. Dark Might 6 has a very rhetorical question asking, who is the best Townseek character and why is it Blubby?
That's from Discord later.
Yes. You'll get DM'd later on why. And then Lucy Game Dev asks, did you make the animations in Unity? And I think we'll get to that in a short minute. We have a whole section on the art and animation, so stick around and you're going to hear all about that. But I think that's a good segue to talk about the more about the art style, because looking at all the items, all the characters you meet, the landmarks, the little critters that are all around the world, there's a lot of assets in this game. A lot of assets, right? So I'm wondering, when coming up with the style of the game and all of that, what informed the style? Was it the number of assets that you knew you were going to create? Was it the experience you've had in the past? Can you just dive into a bit more of that hand-drawn style?
Yes. As I mentioned before, it was created this style was used as a necessity to iterate on it as fast as possible to make a game within 48 hours. Yeah. So I'm an artist that do mostly 2D artwork. There are ones that use anti-alias, which means that the outlines are usually blurry or the like. But I didn't want to go into doing something very perfectionist because we didn't have time for details. So I decided to remove the anti-alias, which means that the lines are a bit more jagged. And this is a style mostly used primarily for pixel artwork. If you zoom here, for example, you can see that the lines itself kind of look like pixels because, well, they are pixels, but it's neither pixel art because I didn't select every specific piece. So it's a combination of pixel artwork and hand-drawn artwork. So the whole game is hand-drawn. There are some techniques and some utilities that we have used to make some quick iteration, like copying pasting areas but still makes most of it look specific. So, other than that, it's pretty much that.
Okay, great.
Hand-drawn pixel art.
And I guess to achieve that look without the smoothing, is it right that you used point filtering to make sure that it wasn't smoothed out? Yeah.
Yes, so all of the assets that Muskie sends, so we both use Git, we both are able to... Muskie gives me the assets, I import them into Unity, and they're all imported with point filtering. So, for example, if I go here to the quick game view and I just quickly maximize it, it's going to look pixelated no matter what resolution we use. So Muskie is going to talk about it in a bit, but for example, our target resolution is 1440p. That's like what we use as a base for the actual assets, for actually making the assets, for like everything as UI elements, frames, 9 slices, all of that. But we still want to make the game to look good. So the fact that it's point filtering, because of this very unique style, also makes sure that it looks good no matter what device you're using it. So if you're using Steam Deck at 720p, it looks good. If you're using like a 4K screen, it gets zoomed in, so it's also still looks like pixel art. So
okay, so that's great. And does the camera does zoom in and out during the game, right?
Yes, so we use Scene Machine for the animations. I'm going to go here into the brain, not the position camera, and see if I turn on the guides. And just to give you an example how it works.
Please do.
Like quickly open play mode.
Yeah.
I should probably keep it turned on during the stream.
There we go.
Yep, it's going.
Yes. Almost there.
Yes. So let us quickly swap over to the player camera. Let us quickly... Oh, do I have gizmos or not? No, not gizmos. Yes, but yes, we use Scene Machine for like smoothing out the movement of the player. We use it for zooming in and out. So for example, I'm going to quickly enable developer mode here. Like for example, when you're using the turbo, it will zoom out and it will still always, again, it will always look, because of point filtering, it will always keep that pixelated look no matter how far away or close in you look.
Right. There we go. And then the camera also has a kind of like a sway to it.
Yes. So one of the interesting things we added in using the noise channel of Scene Machine, just a quick sway of the camera. Let me make sure it's on. Yes, it's on. You essentially get this small sway. It's easier to notice when in full screen. Let me do that. But yeah, because of the illusion that you're in an airship, you're kind of like just floating around. We wanted to have like also a bit of a sway and a bit of, just something satisfying to add a bit more juice to exploration.
Right. I think it's really working. It really gives you that feeling like you're on the airship, like you're in the sky. The wind is pushing you back and forth. That's fantastic. All these little details that you might not notice at first, but really have an effect. That's great. So I think this is a great time we're getting lots of questions about the animation in the chat. So just to talk about more in depth about the art and animation and the implementation. So we'll move on to that section where something that you pointed out to me when we spoke earlier was all the little critters all around the world. And so I think people would love to see that and how those are imported into the game.
So, Masky, do you want to cover that for me or should I do this?
You can do the start because mine is more specifics.
Okay, so all of the assets that Muskie prepares are normally spreadsheets. Spreadsheets is the data, but most of the assets Muskie gives me are in spreadsheet formats. So the animations are, they're drawn in advance, like with the program that Muskie uses for the arts, and I normally, just import them into the game. I go in, divide them into slices using the sprite editor from Unity. set them their pivots in case the sprite needs it, and all of these animations are presets. So for the game, we normally use like these 3-frame idea where most of the things in the game will have 3 frames of animation, and that applies to landmarks, it applies to towns, it applies to pretty much every single detail in the worlds. One of the things that people notice after a while playing are these small creatures, which we have literally hundreds of variations of them, and we place them all over the world in a bit of like a random fashion, a bit of like these predefined spawn points that we have in the scene of the game. And yeah, all of these have their animations. Let me quickly open like one that can be a good example. Like
Chat is loving the critters right now, by the way. Cake Magic screams, so many critters. There's one.
And yeah, all of these. So for the animations, Musky sends them over to me. I set up like a Unity animator, normally for the base of the landmark or for a given creature. Different creatures will have different animators, and I'll get a bit more in depth into them in a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we just actually animate each of these frames in Unity. So if I set up to the here playing, yeah, it's just a keyframe system very, very quickly. And
So
this
cute.
all applies to all of the animations. That's, just allows that. And then depending on the situation, we might like spice it up with like a small scale up. We might spice it with like a slight delay. So like each creature has like a more unique animations. So it's very simple to like, in the end, Musky has to do their job because he has to do the assets. Because other than that, they're ready to go. I just need to set them up into Unity. And each creature, for example, like now that we're talking about creatures because they're one of the most common elements in the game, they're going to have multiple animation controllers. So we set up a base animation controller, for example, for this duck type. And then we use one of the good features I forgot for a while that existed in Unity, which is the override controllers, which are these other animator types, which essentially allow us to keep the same state machine. So this one we, for example, use for the ducks, which have a standard alternate and floating animation. And then we just have to retarget the clips. And so we can use the same state machine without, just replacing the clips, and we can do multiple variations. So for example, select here duck 4 without having to set up the parameters each time.
Yes.
Or having duplicate and possibly later on, like, making an accident where we accidentally deleted a parameter in an animation, and then we have a desync there.
And I don't think that animation override is very commonly used, so it's great to see this. And because you're not really using a color swap shade or anything like that, you're actually, and that's because with the different colors, you're actually adding little details to the animations and not just changing the colors, right? Could you show me an example of a character who, with the color, more than just the color, actually changes?
Okay, let me grab here another creature that's commonly used.
Yeah. So let's let me tell you. The sprites works, all of this was made on Clip Studio Paint. The program is relatively irrelevant because we can use Photoshop or Krita. I use just it because of convenience. But like George is going to show, what I do is I make the artwork on the program. Inside I separate it in a grid where everything is moved evenly as to just import it to Unity and it can be separated. And we do not use things like changing the colors inside of Unity, because sometimes we decide that we want to add different small details to them. Like this one is dancing, I like it, the kiwi. But for example, do you have the one with the hat?
Yes, I'm looking for it, and there it is.
So there you go.
So I have to make them on my own end, as to give them a small details like hats or the like, which are not always just put it on top, because sometimes they move from one way or another.
Right.
Another big example, a more drastic example of that is, for example, the whale. So we still want to classify these as whales, but they actually have like big variations because we have more realistic whales, and then we have the more like our studio logo, more like rounded off ones. Or not this one. This is still a realistic one, but then we have like this more, not this one as well.
It just goes to show how many variations you actually have and why the animation override is very important. Okay.
Yes, and then we have Tizal, and again, Tizal use like there are 13 variations of whales.
Yes.
And all of them use the same animation base, and then we can just quickly replace them. And we can even do stuff like these.
So if I can summarize, you have an animator And all the whales have the same set of animations, but the animations themselves are pulled from different parts of the sprite sheets because they're not just color swaps. They have different features like sunglasses, different facial features, different shapes entirely, right? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's this base animation, which whales only have one called standards. And instead of, setting up this graph for every single, whale variation, we just create a new clip. And then, this override controller allows us to, target a new one. And we could have possibly done the system with just using animation clips, but again, this allows us for a more in-depth set of conditions.
Yeah.
Again, very small details into the world, but for example, let me give you an example of another creature. Frogs can spawn on land and on water. So the animator for frogs actually has the parameter for water. And they actually have, for example, these other sprites which only gets enabled in certain animations. So for example, if it's on water, this lily pad game object actually gets enabled.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we have so many amazing comments in the chat. Cake Magics loves the shy whale, first of all. And what is it? Carlton says a lot of whales, but definitely not too many whales. Then we also have more whales, more better, which is, I think, very, very accurate. Certainly. Hazel would adopt the duck. So yeah, I think the cute art masterclass from Hazel as well. I think this is a masterclass on cute art. So thank you, Mosky. I think my personal favorite though is the frog. I don't know if you have the frog on hand. I would love to show people the frog.
Okay, there's the frog again. Yes, we have different animations for them.
You should show the cosmetic later.
Yeah, we'll show the cosmetics later.
The frog has cosmetics. Perfect. Okay.
And we normally use prefabs and prefab variations for all of these, so it's easier to manage. So critters here are like probably one of the most simple concepts in the game. They still like make a big difference because people will go like, they're going to be traveling to the world, and suddenly, the first time they're just taking in, like checking like all of these towns, all of these landmarks that exist. But as they start getting acquainted with Explorer, they realize, oh, there's like all of these small animals appearing, like there's cats spawning in. There's they're actually different by each region you're on.
Right.
And we pretty much have to set up all of that information, like also like how much distance each creature should spawn from each other, how much offset should they have, like if the sprite can flip, if it can be on water, all of that.
In practical terms, the critters do not add anything to the game itself. However, as we expanded on the area, we wanted to create more diverse areas, more biomes, and we decided to start making critters. And we needed a lot of critters for each area, and we needed them to spawn in very concentrated places. So, for example, if there's a place that could be used with frogs, it can spawn frogs, but that doesn't mean that the frogs spawn everywhere in the world. Right. And they also not necessarily spawn in a specific fashion. Everything is slightly randomized, so that's why we also have so many different animations and different variations, so that when the player goes another time, they can actually see sometimes the different critters altogether.
So just to give some more technical context on that, we actually have like these we're trying to approach the game in a way that everything is undrawn or unplaced, and there's like some variations, in trading, in the critters that spawn. So in the world, we actually have these critter spawners, which are like small transforms, which is the collider and a gizmo, which are used for checking if the player is nearby, if this creature should spawn because it's visible to the player. And then like these different points in the world will have a list of different prefabs that it should spawn, like how many should spawn on this place, if it can be on top of any interactables that might spawn on top of them, like some of the balloons you probably saw earlier. And we just set up all of these as much as possible to be as flexible on our ends as we can to like add all of these details into the world.
Fantastic. And the spawners, do they have the tag of which biome they're in and all of that?
We make separate. We make separate. They're also prefabs, so we use separate prefab variations for each of them. So this one is called the Meowsville Animal Spawner, and it has bunnies, cows, chickens, and all of that. And over here, if I move to the right to this town called Stonehenge, it has like a few more. So it has some more desert animals like snakes and wolves.
Oh, so you just have a list of all the animals that would show up for each prefab of spawner, and you have a set of prefabs for different types of spawners.
And and the same idea is used, for example, for digging spots. Like we even have these game object that's created temporarily just to help us with placements. It's a prefab it's a game object that's spawned in with don't save. There's a thing in Unity called hide flags. And so it's a game object that is created like for just when we have the item selected, for example, this balloon. So it helps us like make sure that it doesn't overlap anything, that it's displayed well. And so when we're going around and editing the world, we can just have a preview of it right there with the prefab, and it doesn't get saved because the moment we deselected it, it just disappears. But it helps a lot while we're just editing this scene.
Okay. Great. And we have a question from the chat about the number of critters from Lucy Game Dev. It says, while developing, did you have any CPU, RAM, or GPU problems? How did you optimize so many sprites? That's a great question.
Yes, so that's a very interesting thing about our game. So a bit of a spoiler as we zoom out, everything in the game is actually one scene. So our idea is to try to make it so once you go past the preloader, which loads in fmods, which takes care of the audio, once it loads the localization strings and all of that, the moment you get into the game, you're pretty much loading less from that point onwards. So the first loading takes a bit like 15-20 seconds, but after you do that, you're immediately thrown into this world, and ideally want it to be non-stop until you close it. And so we use multiple techniques in order to kind of optimize it. So just to give a bit some context, we've had 2 demos for Townseek so far. One was our early demo, which happened in last June during Wholesome Directs, and now we did one for Steam Next Fest. During Wholesome Directs, our game build was 5 gigabytes. For Steam Next Fest, it was 1 gigabyte only. So the way we achieved this is we went back, and Unity has this thing called crunch compression, and you can enable it for any sprite that's like a multiple of 4. So here, for example, 300 and 100 are both divisible by 4. So Unity can use this crunch compression. We'll leave it at maximum and quality. So while it takes a bit of time sometimes to regenerate the library, like it compresses them really easily. So Critter Sprite, which normally weighs 3-4 megabytes, gets crunched down to 29 kilobytes.
And that show them a continent.
Show them a continent. And yeah, this is specifically noticeable for continents where, we're still working on optimizing those, but as we're currently developing the game, we want to make it so we can easily iterate continents, change the design of the world, reshape any areas. So right now the continents, and again, please don't do this for the final shipped game, but while we're iterating on them, the continents are these huge textures that get crunched from 300, 400 megabytes down to 60, 50. And this is one of the ways that, for example, we optimize the number of sprites, but it doesn't end there. So Unity also has this very neat thing where...
Can you double click on that continent so we can see it right center of the screen? The sprite, the continent sprite?
Yes, it's enormous.
Yes. There we go. Yeah. Can you even zoom in on that, actually?
Actually, I don't think I can.
Oh, no, not there. Okay,
I can zoom in on the actual game view.
Yes.
Here. And just you can tell the size of the things compared to
the level of details,
and the level of detail.
Great.
And so we already import to assets as sprite sheets into the game, but Unity has this thing called Sprite Atlas, which recently got an overhaul with Sprite Atlas v2. So what they allow you to do is essentially like select a bunch of sprites or folders and say, hey, these sprites should all be packed together when the game is built. And so you can get these these essentially mega sprite sheets, which you don't have to worry about while during development, but Unity will take this in, create this like big texture of these sprites all together, and then reference that during actual runtime without necessarily having to do anything beyond just setting the sprite atlas up. And what this does is, let me give you the example of the critter ones, where they are. There they are. So the critters, again, they're a great example because they're hundreds of sprites, and they all get packed up into this single texture that Unity uses at runtime, and this reduces roll call, so your GPU is accessed less times at runtime, which reduces sizes because all of these files, instead of being loaded separately as they are for the editor itself, they are loaded in a single file at runtime.
This is just amazing, by the way. This is huge. This is just wow. Like, wow is the only reaction for the number of sprites that are on the sheet. This is all of Mosky's blood, sweat, and tears on one page.
We still have some more months to add more.
Yes, we still have a few months of
All that
development to go.
space, too much space on the right. Am I right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it pretty much allows to do this, where
Yeah.
we reduce the amount of memory that the game takes as a 2D game. So again, we went
Gotcha.
from 4 gigabytes to 1 gigabyte, both like in actual file size
Yeah.
and also what gets loaded to RAM.
Gotcha.
So another great example of a Unity tool that might be lesser known, but it's great and has been fantastic. You know the profiler very likely. You know that it helps you, track how much like a script is causing, like how much time is it taking to process. It allows you to check how much draw calls, how much sprite patches are being made, all of that. But another very handy tool that I believe is on preview is the package for the memory profiler, and this essentially allows you to take a snapshot of what the memory for the game is at a certain point. So, for example, I actually have here the work I did while converting the sprites from not using Atlas to actually using Atlas, and you actually get this breakdown of how much memory the game is taking.
Yeah.
What is it being used for? Is it being used for graphics? Is it being used for audio? Is it being used for like plugins and whatnot? And it actually allows you to go down and check, like, configure objects and allocations, like, okay, what's consuming all of this space in memory?
Yeah.
And again, the continents are the biggest offender here because we still haven't gone in and sliced them up and optimized them. But you can see, for example, instead of the cosmetics being all of these different objects being loaded into memory, right here it's the cosmetics sprite atlas, which we use for the ship cosmetics. I can show you those in a bit. And they all get optimized into a single file, which speeds up loading, speeds up draw calls, and speeds up pretty much all of the graphic processing of the game.
And this is a great place for you to track all of that.
Yes, this is a great tool to track all of that, and it allows us to check, like, what's the biggest offender? Is there something that we could optimize that we haven't optimized yet? And just making sure what we need to go in and change or reduce or apply more compression and all of that.
Fantastic. And then Sinpin asks, how are you planning to optimize the continents also with the crunch compression? Question mark?
Yeah, okay, so the continents already use crunch compression right now.
Yeah.
Again, that was one of the ways we saved a lot of memory and a lot of file space. Again, like this Golden Forest was being 400 megabytes, and right now it's like 60 with crunch compression. So one thing we want to do in later on, and again, this is to avoid loading the GPU with such big textures, making sure that it's more digestible for the GPU, because the thing can also like bottleneck.
Yeah.
We want to go in and actually slice the continents in like small bits that we can, then put together again in Unity, and again just make the overall loading smoother, smaller files, smaller file sizes, and possibly also putting them into their own sprite atlases, so they're easy to use.
Great. Okay. And so we've talked about the continents, the critters, how you've built all of that. There's one thing we haven't talked about yet, or actually maybe two things, which is the water and the clouds, and how you actually used shader graph to actually put that together. So, everything behind all the continents and behind all the critters and all of that. So let's maybe look at that. Yeah.
So I'm going to admit right now, and I think Muskie can agree, we're not good technical artists.
Okay.
I have been trying to get into like more technical shaders, understanding like what's needed for like writing in Shader Lab and all of those, the ones that are allow you to do like amazing shader effects. So shader graph is like a good in between for us to understand the technical necessities of technical art without breaking our heads understanding what you're actually reading for the GPU.
Yeah.
So while they're very simple, let me quickly find. We actually use shader graph for very simple effects in the game. One of the most noticeable ones is the actual waves. Let me quickly open the shader graph. They're going to notice it's a very small graph, but it goes to show that you don't need to do much to make a good illusion in the game. So what we're essentially doing here is just like, hey, pick on this texture, grab this offset, grab this tiling factor, and just offset the texture as you go in runtime. And so you're going to notice I'm going to put it on play, just again to show the effects. Thank you, script assemblies. You're always lovely. These water, just the water and the clouds, they tile so that they look seamless as they go around, and also the water. And what we do using those parameters we set up in shader graph and also exposed to the editor, like here, for example, offset, is that we have a script. So if I go to Ocean, these are everything but what I want. Ocean. Let me quickly find the sprites. Yes, waves. I actually call them waves. What we do is we create a vector that holds the speed variation, like how much should the waves change, and like a time interval. And every few minutes, you're going to notice that the directions of the waves and the direction of the clouds will actually change. Because what we do is like we multiply the speed that we rolled by the offset, and then shader graph just does that and just moves the offsets the texture back and forth to create this very smooth illusion of the waves going on the backgrounds or the clouds and other objects. And yeah, and we also use it for other stuff. For example, we use it for if I quickly go to the UI, you can actually use, probably not a good suggestion, but you can actually use shader graph for certain UI things. For example, we use it for solid sprite colors. So for example, these ones are just the sprites that's having its color stripped out and like overridden with a color that we define on the editor.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And this way, like we can use these silhouettes without having to create new sprites. And we have other more complicated texture, a few more complicated ones, which I don't know if we're using right now. Together with render textures that we use for, stripping out certain data or changing how a sprite works to display it onto worlds.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's funny because we actually got a few questions about the UI and how you handle UI in the game, the UI elements. So I guess partially you're using shader effects for the aesthetic of things, but
so yeah. UI is a very hard relationship between all of us. It's mostly because the game has a lot of UI between towns, between the collection, between the journal. There's a lot of different UI that's used in Townseek. So it's also work that we're still doing to optimize it. But for example, we actually use animators. It's a bit disputed if you should use animators or if you should use twinning for UI animations. But if you, for example, in terms of optimization, if you subdivide items in canvas, if you are fairly careful and fairly sanitary in how you use those animators, you can actually get decent results without causing much canvas redraw, which is normally the issue with UI while you're working in the game. So all of these different icons are separate canvas, so Unity treats them separately and redraws them separately rather than redrawing them as a wall. And then we use like Animator for that. It's not fully perfect yet. There's still a few optimizations that we need to do, like using object pooling for the scrolling list. So for example, you see here there's like multiple objects and then there's more down below. If we, for example, I'm going to give you an example and I'm going to break the game. I have a development hotkey where I can easily just put the entire inventory into my backpack.
Okay.
And you're going to notice that there's actually a small hiccup there while it's creating all of these thumbnails for all of these objects. So that's an example of an optimization that we still need to do. And again, like reducing the amount of, how many things are happening in the canvas at the same time. Again, we don't think there's going to be a situation where the player has 400 items in the inventory at the same
just
time.
No trading, only hogging.
Only hogging. But it is something, for example, we're actively looking towards.
Yeah. That's for town hoarders.
Yes.
The update.
So you notice like a small hiccup there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. The next thing we're going to go into is scriptable objects. But before that, I'd like us to go on a short 5 to 10 minute break. George, why don't you maybe give a quick introduction to scriptable objects for the people watching? Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I think we can go into the editor really quick.
Yes.
So scriptable objects are the best inventions in sliced bread.
That's a good one.
No, really. So In Unity,
God bless
you
him.
already probably know the concept of what a game object is as like an actual thing that exists in the world. You probably know what assets are. And so what scriptable objects are in practice are how can I explain this? They are essentially data in the format of an assets. That's the best way I can describe it. So essentially, you can create scriptable objects to represent various abstract concepts in your game, like an item, a town, a location, anything that you might want really to be an information object in the world in the game. So, they're one of, I'd say they've been more widely used in Unity games as of lately. But if you're not using scriptable objects yet, it might be worth looking into them because they really offer like a new approach to how you can be flexible in Unity. And some people asked us, hey, why don't you use something like JSON or a database or these different ways to import information into your game and then run that at runtime? Our approach to how we make games and how we use Unity is more let's use Unity to its strengths and what Unity actually has. So using a mix of the game objects, the prefabs, the assets that we already have, scriptable objects are another great addition to that toolset. So for the game itself, we use a lot of scriptable objects. So to go even a step back, we essentially divide the projects. As I program and script the game, I divide the project into 3 categories, essentially: data, logic, and UI.
Okay.
And all of those things are essentially separate concepts. So data represents all of the scriptable objects, which I'll show you what they look like in a bit. Logic is everything you do in the world, like these landmarks, interacting with the fishing spots and fishing. And UI, is all of the UI stuff. And the idea is that these 3 concepts are essentially self-contained. So, logic reads data and UI reads logic. But for example, a scriptable object is meant to be like this standalone data thingy that shouldn't really, talk back to the logic. Like the logic can go to the data to grab any information, like, descriptions, prices of the items, if there's any special logic that the item represents. And we just try to keep those things self-contained, both for, as we grow the project and as the project technically grows in terms of the number of scripts, in terms of numbers of things that are together, and just kind of keep everything sanitized as much as possible, so we know where to find each thing. So scriptable objects are like the first of those things. They're the data objects.
Right.
And quickly going over here to, to our writer. Writer is the IDE that I use for programming in Unity. You likely use Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. They're both fine choices. I use Writer because of its deeper integration with Unity.
Okay.
And it's very easy to just get a scriptable object rolling. You use these parameter calls. Let me open a simpler one. Like you create, these are all complicated scriptable objects. Where's the simple one? Okay, there it is. So you inherit, instead of inheriting a script from mono behavior, you inherit from a scriptable object, and this will mark this object as a scriptable object, and then you use this thing called the create asset menu attribute to declare like how Unity should show these into create assets menu. So I'll show that to you in a bit. So here, for example, we have a discovery, and it holds all of the information about what the discovery is, like a key, so it's easier for us to use for saving data. We use like the localization keys that are used for displaying the name, the icon, if the discovery is like a landmark, a town, a mine, a fishing spot, etc. And then we use these throughout the game for different things. So that's the discovery. And then like if I go here to our folder of locations discoveries, you see the representation of those discoveries as actual scriptable objects. So for example, here's that scriptable object, for example, for one of the landmarks we have in the world. So let me zoom it. So we have this beehive colony here, and here's the information that is relevant to the beehive colony.
Yes.
Now, One quick shout out, the scriptable objects you see here, they normally don't have icons other than whatever icon you assign to the script. These icons you see here are another asset we got from the asset store called asset icons. They're very flexible. Nice. They're very flexible for to create more visual stuff that we can use in the game. Must get to take a quick second out for seconds. There he is.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, we use scriptable objects for storing data of the game. And yeah, we use these for pretty much every concept in the game. So landmark discoveries are one, landmarks are another, and they hold other types of information, such as like what's the descriptions that appear when you interact with them. We use them for the items as well. So like
that's so convenient for like locating things in your folders.
Mm-hmm. And this will hold all of the information, like, hey, here's the name that should be displayed, here's the description, does the item have a category, does the item have an origin, what's their price, does it qualify for the project completion, and all of that. And this is where my other favorite thing after slide spreads and scriptable object comes in. One of the fantastic plugins that we use is Odin Inspector and Serializer.
Amazing.
And that really helps open up even more usage for scriptable objects as these data containers that you can use throughout your projects. So Odin introduces this more advanced concept of a scriptable object called a serialized scriptable object. Because if you don't know what the Odin serializer part does, is that Odin serializer essentially extends the Unity editor with the capability to serialize more complex data types like dictionaries, inherit lists, which I'll get to in a bit, and using the Inspector plugin as well, it allows you to use attributes to draw various things as well, like a lot of things from toggles to folds outs to box groups. It just makes using Unity editor simpler. It allows you to make easier editor windows, just more complex data types.
Right.
And we use that with the scriptable objects here. So items are one example of these more advanced serial objects, scriptable objects. So you see here that we have the data type.
Yeah.
But for example, if I go into the cosmetics, we have this thing called the item components. Okay. And these item components are another script called item components. And then what Odin allows us to do with the serialized scriptable object is have these lists of classes, for example, of item components that we can inherit from, so we can mark like if the item is, a farming item, a fishing item, if if it's a tutorial, like should it trigger something? Can it be dig into worlds? Is it like a cosmetic that has like a prefab that we need to spawn when loading into the player's cosmetic, and all of that? And it can go even like a step crazier, for example, with quests. So with quests, what we do, let me open here a complex one, let's go for lunch break. What this allows to is using the scriptable objects. Again, we have the information like what's the name, what's the icon, like a watermark that appears behind the town interface. And where it gets very interesting is that we can have this list of quest steps. These are called quest step recipes. And essentially we can define all of these different types of quest steps that you need to do to complete a quest, and just do all of that directly into Unity editor because you have access to these more powerful serialized lists. So here, for example, we have a quest that involves you getting an item. Again, we provide like a key and like what it should appear in UI, and we pass in some parameters, but I can mix and match these as much as we want. So if we wanted, like, we could add in for these quests a step that requires you to go fishing, a step that requires you to get a certain currency, a step that requires you to visit a certain landmark, and all of these, again, done in the inspector. So again, it's more about working smart than necessarily spending a lot of time in custom tools and stuff like that. This is still a custom tool, but it all uses the Unity inspector to the best of its abilities. Like, hey, we already have these. Let's make use of what we've got. And another complex example of scriptable object usage is the towns. So if I go here to data, locations, and towns, here are all the different towns that exist in the project. And, these have to be a bit more complex because you'll have to have like an inventory stock that we have. They need to have price fluctuations. They need to have all of this information that happens in real time.
Right.
I'm pretty much giving a lecture here.
I love it.
Because we can just keep going for 4 hours about cases you can do these.
Go for it.
So I'm going to open Chartwell.
Does chat have any complaints? If you have complaints, let's hear them now. Otherwise, I think we keep going. Yeah, go ahead.
So for example, a town object has the information like what's the name, what's the description, an icon, a header, a stencil. Like we even have like a parameter that defines, hey, should this be included into demo or should it just be included into retail build because we actually have a demo again. And then we use like an inspector for like this more pane situation. So this is only a single scriptable object, but we have like these panes that we can use to organize information better. And again, more sprites definition like the background, the host. Here we can get into like the actual training inventory. Like, hey, what are the items that exist on the town? Like, at what rank should they be unlocked? How much stock they have, and all of these. And we can just define this here, and the game will immediately reflect that because the game will just be reading the scriptable object and saying like, oh, this town now has like a fish burger. Let's create the icon for that.
Right.
And it fetches like that information from the scriptable objects.
Oh, wow.
Here's another one that are the category modifiers. So what I mentioned earlier about different items having different price fluctuations. This is what we call the category modifiers. And you can see here, like in Chartwell, entertainment will roll the price between multiplying it by 0.7 or 1.4. So it's more likely, this one has the equal odds. But something like, a food item will roll between 0.9 or 1.3. So it's more likely that the item will roll up at a higher price than average. And
if I may interject here, a lot of these subjects, like I am not the programmer and I'm not that versed into Unity myself. However, because we work with Google Spreadsheet, most of the time that we're working on this kind of stuff, I am the one that writes down the items, try to balance them in the sheet. Okay. I have like the 10 different pages, and it's just documentation. And because of this, it's as simple as I just do some tweaks. You just can check them, put them here, and since the system is already done, the tweaks and the balancing is done extremely fast. So this way, both of us can work. He can do that while I go work independently on the sheets, and then he just imports them pretty much.
Yeah,
it's fantastic workflow.
That's fantastic. So Mosky, you're essentially doing all of your work outside of Unity, and you've built a pipeline, George, that updates from the sheet.
No, we actually do it manually, but because it's easier for us to identify what has changed.
Yeah.
And what has changed, it's very easy to just go in, not having to worry about any mid steps like importing from sheets or anything like that, and we just tweak it there, and the change is not real time, but it's almost real time,
basically,
because we can just change all of these dynamically, very directly on Unity, with little having to opening any other window, with little in betweens, and that allows us for a very, very quick iteration rate. Amazing. Where we can just use Inspector for setting up game objects and setting up components and setting up all of that. We just use that, but for the data that exists in the projects.
Perfect.
And so it makes it like very, very quick to just get things rolling.
That's great.
And I could just continue.
I'm actually waiting for you to keep going about the scriptable object. Yeah, absolutely.
There's multiple ways we use them, like fishing pools, like what does a location in the world use for this fishing table, same thing for the mining, the currencies, what sound effects should they use from Fmods, the cosmetics, again, have like what we call the item components for displaying like, hey, this is the prefab that should be loaded. It just goes through that, like the journal pages that get displayed, locations, the quests again go very in depth. One recent addition was or cutscene and talk system for the towns.
Yeah.
If you saw how that worked with the quests, with the different quest steps, this is even more interesting because let me quickly open. Where is it? Talking. I think it's on cutscenes instead. Let me quickly find it. Intro cutscene. Intro cutscene. There you go. And what we did here is, so the cutscene itself is a scriptable object called talk, or a serialized scriptable object, whatever. And what we have, and I'm going to show this on Unity on Rider, is we have a base item, a base class called talk events. Wait, talk events, and you're going to see here. I even have like a snarky comment about these. Hey, this is just an abstract class to say it is a talk events, and then what we do is like inherit from these, and essentially it allows us to do more different ways to show, for example, what appears during a cutscene or what appears when a host is talking. So, for example, the most basic example is we inherit from that talk event, and we create a message talk, and these allow us to say like, hey, a host is going to say this with this sprite, and it might display this emotion on top.
Right.
Or we can have some for like giving you an item and opening the journal when it appears. We can have something as simple as a delay, because those are always useful. One that fades into screen in and out. And yeah, we just use all of these, and because if I go here to the actual talk object, which is this one, this is where the magic from Audience Serializer comes in. We just have a list of those talk events over here.
Yeah.
And on the Unity Inspector, this is going to reflect itself as this. And again, because of the serializer, we can just go here and add any of those events, like open a town. Like here's the example of a message one, like, hey, it is something. Here's like a fade. What color should the fade be in? Hey, should we change the audio that is here in like the game, so we don't have, like, for example, somewhat the atmospheric sounds that we have set up by John during cutscenes. And yeah, it just allows for this very flexible setup of just, again, being a very data heavy game where there's a lot of talking, there's lots of items, there's lots of locations, for all of this to be managed in an easy way in the project. Yes.
Speaking of John, the audio designer on your project, who I'm guessing is Dr. John Elliott in the chat, says, seeing the inside of this complicated machine just makes me appreciate George more. I think it makes us all appreciate George more. And thank you for the very deep and technical and insightful breakdown of the scriptable object system. And I think what we're going to do now is, now that we've looked at the art and the animation, we've looked at the animation workflow, we now understand how scriptable objects work in the game. We're going to go through the whole process of importing something and putting it into the game, from art to the game, in one go. So maybe you can walk us through placing a landmark.
Yes, there's a few more steps that are in between that, but I'll comment those quickly.
Yes.
But yes, so I'm going Muskie earlier. So we're currently working on this continent here to the right. So we've been working like one continent at a time.
Yes.
And we're currently working on this lava section hub here in these desert continents. And one of the landmarks that's going to be on it is this rolling volcano that you see to sprite here. It's like this very drolly, funny looking volcano thingy.
Yes.
So first thing I'm going to do is quickly set the sprite up. So I'm just going to set that to multiple. Again, it can use crunch compression because it must be prepared that in advance. Mine the second because it's packing them in advance, because I already set up that folder to be included into Sprite Atlas.
Right.
So let it quickly just do that.
Yeah, this is an update of one of the files that we had in the jam. So it had to be recreated pretty much from scratch and high definition and whatnot.
I see.
So it's good to finally get to that one.
That's awesome. So it's an early design, but an updated art style.
Yes, so I can go in, I slice the sprite into like the different cells. You're going to notice that we actually include the outline as part of the sprite, again, because sometimes we fill in some spaces. It gives us a bit more control than just, for example, using an outline shader.
Right.
So I apply that, let it just generate the sprite atlas again.
It makes them look like stickers.
Oh, that's great.
We actually should do stickers of the landmarks.
Absolutely.
Generate atlas masks for that. Uh,
I want the entire Townseek map as like a big frame right behind me.
And yeah, what I normally do just to cut a bit of time is I go in and grab one of the landmarks that already exists. I just duplicate it and use it quickly as a base because all of these are variants. So that just allows me to quickly get into that. So I quickly rename this Buffcat Cave to the Rolling Volcano. I'm going to quickly replace the space sprites for it. So I go in, replace the outline, replace the sprites. I'm also going to do the same with the animator, so I'm going to copy this one that already exists, rename this to Landmark Rolling Volcano, grab the other animation that was also copied, give it the same name. Right. Here's the override components again for the landmarks. I can put it, replace the animation here on the animator. Let me go in. Again, the sprite is going to change because I'm still retargeting. Going to change the sprites here into key sheet animation.
Right.
Do that really quick. Again, it's going to look weird for a second because we're changing all of these sprites here.
Absolutely.
Do that, and put that. And I'm going to quickly copy these because we normally do sprites 1, 2, 3. Check how it looks. What do you think, Musky? Should it be faster? Should it be slower?
I think that's slightly slower, maybe.
Okay, I love this. We're actually developing the game with the chat real time, right? So this is fantastic.
So this is pretty much that. So yeah, that looks good. The rolling volcano now looks good. Yeah. I'm just going to tweak a few more things. Like here's the smoke that appears on top of the landmark while it's still not discovered. Fix that floating point right there. Check the quest sign. We can move these over here. A bit more. Again, be perfectionist. Cute. I don't want to be perfectionist while we're on stream, but normally we go in and check all of these values.
Yeah.
This is the icon that appears when you're supposed to deliver tourists to a place.
Mm-hmm.
Put that in place. Okay, the landmark is ready to go in terms of prefab. Now we go in. And normally I also duplicate it, but to give you again an example of how scriptable objects work, I go to discoveries. You see that creates, Townseek, locations, discovery, drilling volcano. I'm going to give it a key. I normally call it discovery and the name of the base. And you're going to see that I have it automatically filling in the name key as well. And it's going to fetch our localization for that.
Yeah.
Give it a quick icon, which is just mostly for editor use. You see it updates it here. And this is a landmark. And then we can go in and say hey, should this be on the demo? Should this be only on retail? Should it be on both? We can also control that as well. So the discovery is one of the things we store. And I'm going to do the same here because it's a landmark. Townseek, locations, landmark, drilling volcano. You're going to see that as I add in. Oh, drilling volcano. Why did it not? Might have a typo somewhere. Oh, okay, I typed the wrong key. Okay, it's landmark drilling volcano. There it is. It updated the localization previews immediately. I can go in, again, put the sprites, and I can go quickly grab the event from Fmod, which John also set up in advance. So there's the audio event that's triggered by Fmod. Save that. Go to the prefab again. Quickly assign those. Rolling volcano, and the landmark as well. When you just go open here, open the map prefab, open to Oasis. Where is the Oasis? There it is. And I can just grab it in, place it in the world. I'm going to place it here just so you can see it.
Yeah.
It's actually meant to be there, but whatever. Again, we can change this after the stream. Save. And what we do is to keep track of all the scriptable objects when you're loading from save data. We actually have a database that we use in advance. It's also a scriptable object that lists all scriptable objects. Again, things. I'm going to build it. I think I have an issue here. Quickly. Oh, yeah, there's a missing element. No worries. Let's just refresh that. There it is. Duplicates. No worries. That's not a problem right now. It actually warns me if there's any duplicates. And I also have to quickly go here. So singletons are a disputed thing in Unity, but we actually use them a lot.
Okay.
And this one tracks all of the discoveries. And if I save, maximize, and play,
All right, let's meet the
open.
drooling volcano.
If everything went fine, it should just work out of the box like that.
So it took me around an hour and a half to make it, and it took him like 5 minutes to just put it in.
You put it in perfect. That's how you want it.
I'm going to open
exactly.
I'm going to quickly enable the dev thing so I can turbo.
Are we gonna turbo speed? Okay, nice.
Yes, let me just go over all of this, and there it is.
There we go.
Its respective descriptions and whatnot.
It's just
and it's just like that.
Oh, you already have all the text and everything. Okay, great.
So we can pretty much iterate and just change this data.
But it laughs
really quickly, thanks to the scriptable object setup we've come up with.
That's perfect. Oh yeah. So who timed that? What was that? 5 minutes? 4 minutes? Good job. We had a question in the chat that was asking from JuiceTube. How did you come up with such a seamless workflow? Any resources that helped? I'm guessing it was just a lot of iteration and seeing what you needed, but I'd love to hear your answer.
Yes. So even this applies to both the programming side and the art side. A lot of it honestly just comes down from experience of having done many gem games that we've done before and just realizing like, hey, what's a good way to achieve a goal? I feel like one of the issues that a lot of especially junior programmers and people getting into programming is that they fear making mistakes or fear like the optimization that the code has right from the get-go. When at the end of the game, let's be honest, like most games, behind what you play are a broken mess. And I know that's kind of like not to disrespect any developer's work, and of course, like it's just that there's a lot of at some point you have to not worry as much as say something like optimization or something like it is the best possible way to structure this logic, but more on a way that it satisfies what you want your player to experience in the most seamless way. So it's not like at the end of the day what matters for the game is not like, hey, this is divided into like very refactored classes. It's divided like into 6 or 7 different objects that all have like a different structure, so like no programmer could come in and mess with those. Like at the end of the day, that's not what matters. Like how is that going to affect when you're actually playing the game? And at the end of the day, what the consumer or the player is going to see is like, how does it play? Is it fun? And that's kind of like what's the most important. So when you're iterating, when you're iterating and you're getting used to getting your game rolling, it's more important of just trying to get what you want from the experience, and these systems and the requirements you need to make for them will just become apparent as you go. So it's more like what I think defines experience in programming is understanding like how many steps and how many things you need to do to reach your end goal. Like how many different designs are there going to be like for quests, and what do I need to be able to represent those quests in a way that's easy for us to program in, to add them in as quests. So I think that's like the important thing. So it's really just trial and error, experience, and admittedly cutting corners.
Okay, so it's you essentially worked your way there.
Yes.
From yeah. Okay. Cool. So as people said in the chat, trial and error, working your way there. Somebody said your development just now was it was like an any % speed run.
And basically does it work? Does it feel good? And can it be tweaked to your needs in the future?
Exactly right. And every game is going to have its own needs, right? And it's going to have a different workflow. So you can learn what you can from what George just did, and then hopefully tweak it for your own project. Make it work for your own game.
I think I'm going to actually compliment you. The Greater Spotlights are an incredible example of that, because if you go and watch the archive of that, you're going to see, like, for example, the devs for Velodrome had to roll out their own tools to make like those very complex levels in their own way and their own iteration speed. So each project ends up having their needs. Like we don't need a complex level design tool, but we need these tools and this scriptable object setup that allows us to just getting data as fast as we can into the game and just iterate on that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. That's actually what we're trying to do with the creator spotlights. We really want to show people that there's no one way to make a game, and with developers that are as generous as you, who are willing to showcase how they made their game. I think it's the kind of resources that developers need, and the kind of it gives you the kind of confidence to see that, look, you can also make a game, right? Like it's not impossible to make games, and you make it more achievable. You show how achievable it is.
A lot of our philosophy with Townseek was really to design a game. In addition to all we talked about traveling and whatnot, was also to design a game that was within the requirements or skill levels that we can iterate. Like Mosky is really good at coming up with many designs in a very short time. What can we do to get more assets in and still have like an interesting style? I really like programming systems where there's data involved and there's data going around like you just saw with scripted objects. So it was just trying to for Townseek just get like the best of those skills into a game that we could make in the time that we wanted to create a game in.
Yeah.
And so I think it came out nicely, showing both of those strong suits. And also John, which also deserves a shout out. People have also been really complimenting John's audio.
The audio.
You didn't hear much of it during the stream, but again,
but that's why you have to go wishlist the game and get it when it's out, so you can hear the entire soundtrack and all the audio in the game. And we'll drop a link to the Steam page in the chat. So please, everybody who's watching, go and wishlist the game. It's of course helps developers greatly when you do wishlist games. Gives them visibility on the front page. And I mean, who doesn't want to play this game after this look? So
wishlist are the currency of Steam.
Exactly. Professor Vincier says, "Joke's on you, I already did." Follow Professor's example. But yeah, so just to wrap up the stream, we like to end these usually with some words of advice. So this was a long journey to get here. From the game jams that you worked on previously, not being able to meet in person for quite a while, building this game out of that frustration. I'm sure there's so much that you've learned on the way. So if you could just give one piece of advice to the people watching, each of you, that would be great. So we'll start with George.
Okay, so I already gave like a huge piece of advice, but
yes.
I'd say is like, don't be afraid to iterate, and don't be afraid to experiment with the ideas that you have. Normally, for example, when we have art blocks, I've realized that sometimes it's not a question about skill or the ideas being bad. It's just that for some reason we've decided to block out our own ideas. There's no idea that's like invalid. There's no implementation that's wrong. You just kind of have to to continue trying your best. If you're interested in making games, just experiment, just fail, participate in game jams, learn to iterate on our projects fast, learn to understand the limits of scope and what you can actually do, like in reduced time frames. And again, like if for some reason you're unable to later work on a game, or you have a period that you're a bit struggling like with your creative goals that you want to hit, just be aware that everyone kind of goes through that. You might have heard people talk about imposter syndromes. I just talked about art blocks. All of that happens to everyone. So just keep up at it. You're able to pick up. I mean, normally the expression is like you can pick up your pen and put it down whenever you want. You can pick up Unity and put it down whenever you want. So
yeah,
just pretty much go with that.
Great. Thanks, George. That was amazing. And Mosky, yourself.
Well, since I'm not like a programmer or the most suited to talk about Unity, the things that I pick up can be a bit more generic if you say it like that. I will say that the greatest advice that I can give to people when they decide to get into game development with other people is that you need to really you need to give enough attention to communication with the team.
Yes.
Like if we can iterate like this, if we can do the games like we do at the fast speed that we're proud of and we can showcase this, it's because we've been at this for many years now that we've known each other. Yeah. So I know, for example, with constantly talking with George, what are the kinds of assets that he needs for me, and he can understand the things that I need him to do in the game, even if I cannot explain him how he's going to make them mechanically or within the programming on the programming side. And this comes as constant iteration, constant talking with each other. And it's not communication as in we need to be talking all day, every day, which we do, but that's because we have many other roles on the thing. But he gives me agency to do my artwork, and I give him agency to do the programming, and we can give each other feedback. So when you're with communicating with other people, you cannot just assume that they understand what you're saying, or you cannot assume that you know what they're asking for. If there are doubts, you need to ask, and as you continue developing it, you're going to understand their habits, their needs, and they're going to understand yours, and the workflow is going to be a lot more smooth.
Nice. Do you recommend communicating daily? Like I guess you could maybe a daily on Discord, or do you have like a structure for that?
Actually, in our case, like we actually, again, because we're also best friends, so there's also that side. We actually talk primarily through Discord in our case. Our community Discords, discord.gg at Wilson Games, is also our development Discord. So we have all of these chat rooms for public use, but we also have our own developer rooms, and we use that, or Trello, for example, we use Trello for managing tasks. So our Trello tasks that get changed get sent there. Any commits that we make get notified there. So for example, in the morning, in case Mosky either finished an asset because we live in different time zones, or John decided to wake up at 7 a.m. like he decides to sometimes and ask me to the sound, I can immediately know that he did that without having to even open my Git client first.
Yeah.
And then we even Discord has also grown a lot as we've used it. For example, they've recently added threads. So a recent habit that we've picked up is, hey, let's make a thread for these specific topics. So for example, so the chat doesn't become a spaghetti of different things happening at the same time. Like there's a separate threads in our Townseek channel just for us to talk about story. There's a separate thread for us to talk about the sprites that are changing in this Oasis continent that we're working on. And there's even others for town systems, trading stuff, etc., etc.
Okay. Great. Well, I mean, it seems to be working. It seems to be working very well. It's only been a year and a few months, and we're this far along with the game. And I'm just so excited for the release, which is potentially sometime in 2023.
Yes.
Currently, so looking forward to that. Again, everyone, please wish this. George, Mosky, thank you so much for joining me and for sharing so much with us today. And thank you to everyone in the chat for all